Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the Star City Games Season 2 Invitational, part of SCGCON Winter here in Roanoke, Virginia. Brought to you by Ultimate Garden Chronox Shares. I'm Nick Miller alongside Ross Merriam, hot off a 4-0 run in Pioneer. Mono Black Aggro, we saw you play this in Versus Live this week. Seemed pretty good for you here in the tournament.
Yeah, it was very good. It won the most recent Magic Online PTQ. The major innovation there being playing Rankle, Master of Pranks, over Kalidas in the main deck, which I thought was a great change. Rankle gives you a little bit of reach. This flying haste threat is good at attacking planeswalkers, and then with all the recursive threats, it can generate a lot of extra value. It's a really, really good card in the deck.
And this is pretty much as one would draw up an aggro deck in this format. You have a bunch of good one-drops, you have Smuggler's Copter, you have your recursive threats, and you have arguably the two best one-mana spells in the format, Fatal Push, Thoughtseize. Veil of Summer's gone, so your cards aren't ever getting stopped.
Yeah, but that's not a huge deal. Most lists are only playing, two Veil of Summers in their sideboard, but it is definitely a thing. It's a lot easier, a little bit less, I would say, anxiety-ridden to play with black removal spells now that Veil of Summer is gone. But they're both, obviously just very good disruptive elements. The deck is really a Smuggler's Copter deck. You generate so much value discarding Bloodsuck Champion and Scrap Heap Scrounger and then returning them. And I've always liked aggro decks that, even though they have a relatively low curve, we have 13 one-drops, a bunch of twos, curve stops at 4, we still play 24 lands.
Right, you have so much to do with your mana in this deck.
So much.
I mean, we had you on a backup camera match where you had Castle Lock Twain out, weren't even activating it because you had so much mana to use recurring Blood-Soaked Champions and things like that.
Yeah, you normally think of Smuggler's Copter discarding lands, but here your deck is so mana hungry, you keep the lands, you discard the creatures, you recur them, and you eventually have this huge resource advantage. And actually, in a lot of matchups, what you do is, your opponent's going to bring in a lot of anti-aggro cards, life gain, sweepers, things like that. And if they're a creature deck, you can morph into a sort of control strategy with Kalidas and a bunch of removal, and you just trade off when you can with your recursive threats, eventually rebuy them, generate extra value from your lands, and then maybe stick a Kalidas at some point and run away with the game that way. It's definitely how I won a game against Mono Green Devotion earlier. Mm-hmm. So you have that versatility because your cards have so much text on them.
Yeah.
So it really is, it's more than just your, straightforward, curve-out, aggressive deck.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how you decided on this deck, because you've been playing a lot of Pioneer thanks to the Versus Live series. I know you were big on the Ensoul Artifact deck early on. How did you end up on this deck?
Yeah, the Ensoul deck was good for me early. It got a little bit worse once people knew about it. The Ensoul deck is sort of all in. It's powerful enough that you kind of Ensoul your thing and just hope they don't have an answer, and if they don't, they lose. And as long as you get in that 5, the deck can scrape together some wins. But people just had too many disenchant effects in their sideboards. Whereas, this deck, I thought, it's an aggressive deck, which is what I wanted to be. The disruption is good, and importantly, people were catching on to Supreme Verdict being really well positioned.
Yeah.
And this is an aggressive deck that is very good against Supreme Verdict.
Right, almost embarrassing when you get to bring back all of these cards. Smuggler's Copter gets to stick around and you just get to crew that bad boy right again.
Yep.
The removal just does not seem to work against this deck. You just grind through all that.
Yeah, you want to have removal, for Knight and Copter, but those are really the only creatures that your removal is good against. But they're so important to kill that you still need it. But yeah, you just grind right through it. The format is pretty aggressive right now. Even the Green Devotion decks have a more aggressive bent since the Leyline ban. They're not as rampy. So I thought we were going to see a lot of people try to play anti-aggro strategies like things with Supreme Verdict, but also just a lot of cheap removal. So if I was going to play an aggro deck, which is what I wanted to do, I got to play one that's good against those normal anti-aggro cards. And that's what this is. Right,
you've got your Knight of the Ebon Legion, which is another mana sink. We didn't even mention that one. In your one-drop slot alongside Blood-Soaked Champion and Night Market Lookout. One of the greatest combos with Smuggler's Copter. Then, of course, your last one here, Gnarled Scarhide. You got to really dredge the bottom of your bulk binders here, or bulk boxes, to find this one. But a little bit of utility on this 2-1 as well.
Yeah, you want one more one-drop, really. Like, you have an extra slot. You don't really want the 4th Rankle. And adding another one-drop is just going to make your curve a little smoother. The PTQ winning list had a Gutter Bones in that spot. But you already have so much to do with your mana. I thought Gutter Bones just wasn't good enough. I didn't need another threat like that. I did a gather search, and I came to Gnarled Scarhide and Shadow Alley Denizen. But Denizen, because it doesn't trigger from itself, it's a really weak immediate impact. So I ended up going with the Scarhide. And yes, like sometimes your Bestow lets your Night Market look at attack when it otherwise wouldn't. It's another thing you can extend and still be good against Verdict. Sometimes you put it on a flyer to, if you're trying to race in the air, which does often happen. Against like the Field of the Dead decks, they'll eventually come up the ground, and you usually have to slow play a little to not get blown up by Verdict if they're banned. So you end up having to deal those last points in the air with your Rankles and Copters. Scarhide can help do that one turn on the Copter and then it'll fall off, but the Rankle will stay. So there's some interesting utility. I could see playing around with that slot though.
Right. Smuggler's Copter, this might be the best Smuggler's Copter deck I've seen in the format, and that says a lot to how good this card is. You get to just do all the things with it.
It's unbelievable. You also do, your threats keep coming back, so you just never run out of things to crew. Obviously the Night Market lookout synergies, and then the card, it just generates such absurd card advantage.
Scrappy Scrounger, we've seen this one go back to the vehicle days. Rankle though, this card just has so much text, and even in matchups where it doesn't seem like it would be that great, you just get to pick their hand apart or drain them for that extra point of damage. This is the surprising card, I think, for this deck.
Yeah, and the most important thing is that it's a flying haste creature, really. Once you start triggering the ability, you have a lot of things that you can do. Usually by that point, your hand is kind of empty. So the discard is often chosen. If I'm ahead, I don't like choosing the draw mode to let my opponent dig for answers. But if you're behind, let's draw some cards, see if I can find my removal spell. I definitely spent a couple turns digging for a Legion's End against a horde of zombies. Didn't find it, but Rankle would have been much better than to lead us in that spot.
Right. You also get to play a bunch of good lands in this deck. We mentioned Castle Lochtwain already earlier, but another key inclusion, Mutavault, an all-star here.
Yeah, Mutavault's one of my favorite cards of all time. Literally, just full stop. So a deck with 4, I'm already intrigued. Just a super powerful card. You really, because your 2-drops are both artifacts, you don't get bit by the my Mutavault doesn't make black mana early. Sometimes with your triple 1-drop draws, it can be a little awkward, but it's just worth so much. It helps you attack down those planeswalkers. Normally Oko and Teferi are a little out of range. Now with Mutavault, they're in range. Sometimes you just do Copters with them. It's just an
Wrath Insurance. Yeah. It's everything you want.
It's just a great card.
All right, and then you got the Murderous Rider here to go along with the Thoughtseize and Fatal Push, which we already mentioned here. Sideboard, though, you got some nice ones hanging out here. Kalidas, you mentioned your post-sideboard playing control deck, but the thing sticking out to me here, the old Blight Beetle. Talk about this card here, because a lot of people showed up with Hardened Scales.
Yeah, well, if you were on Twitter for the last 3 days, you saw a million people asking last minute for Vivian Arcbow Rangers.
Yeah.
So I kind of got the impression that a lot of people were going to play green decks. And Blight Beetle just works so well, whether they're Hardened Scales, Devotion, or somewhere in between, like Lotus Box. It's great against them, because not only does it stop things like Vivian plussing, but their creatures like Voracious Hydra and Walking Ballista just don't enter the counters. They just do nothing now. And so they don't have if they don't have a Walking Ballista on the battlefield when you cast Blight Beetle, you just shut off basically their entire deck. The Hardened Scales decks, if they're black, if they're going into black, they can have Fatal Push for it. Mm-hmm. They don't have many answers. And then you just end up crewing Copter with it. You can block a big thing that they have sometimes. So it's really I just wanted a haymaker for those matchups because I think they'd be really popular.
Right. I think that it most certainly fills that role. You've got Duresses here to go along with your Thoughtseizes if you need more disruption.
Yep.
Stain the Mind kind of in a similar vein. Then your extra removal here. You've got 2 Disfigure, Legion's End, and some Noxious Grasps. Anywhere these are sliding in particular outside of, the green-white matchups for Noxious Grasp? Or?
Yeah, Legion's End was a late addition because I thought the Bant field decks would be pretty popular. Actually played the matchup twice. Never do Legion's End, but it's quite good against them, while also being good in the Mirror, other aggressive decks, and also good against the green decks because they're playing Walking Ballista and Voracious Hydra. So you can deal with early mana creatures, or you can deal with some of their bigger threats. So that's a card that might see its numbers bumped up.
Yeah.
I thought about going 2-2 split with it and Noxious Grasp, but I also thought the Azorius Flash deck might be pretty popular. Legion's not so good against them.
Right.
Grasp, deals with Avacyn, Spell Queller, Lyra out of the sideboard, all their planeswalkers, things like that. Haven't seen a lot of that Azorius deck, so I think that might have been a misstep in hindsight. Legion's then a little bit
it might serve you later in the tournament. There is a 4-0 in it.
Okay.
So
we'll see how it turns out.
then disfigure, just early interaction.
Yeah, just there to kill Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, creatures out of mono red, just another cheap removal spell. Especially if you morph into that control plan, you don't want to fall behind because it's hard to you can't generate value with your creatures by blocking because a lot of them just can't block. So you actually have, in order to, sort of paradoxically, in order to play that control game, you do have to get ahead. So because you have to be putting pressure on them and forcing them to trade for your, scrappy scroungers and Bloodsoak champions. So you really need cheap removal to make sure that they don't bury you in the first 4 turns.
All right, wrapping up. How do you like the Pioneer format? You've played a bunch of it in Versus Live and online events and whatnot. First paper event, really getting to play it. How do you like it? How do you think it's playing out?
I think the format's awesome. I think Pioneer, it's still early, so we may end up getting, I assume at some point we'll get to a sort of stagnant metagame, and it'll be similar to Modern, but it seems to me like almost every kind of deck is pretty viable. The format's more aggressive now, Magic is just more aggressive now. But there are these field decks that are going over the top. There are some kooky combo decks, Possibility Storm. Maybe somebody comes up with something with Kethis or Simic Nexus. So there's a lot of, of diversity in the archetypes that you can play. I think the gameplay is really interesting. I had a lot of just interesting combat scenarios with this deck over 4 rounds. A lot of close games. So I've been a huge fan of the format, and I'm so glad that the community has adopted it so quickly.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to have to sort of go through this fun early stage where you get to try things out and experiment a lot without a lot of major tournaments, but instead we do get big tournaments to play, and we get to avoid the whole Oko nonsense of Standard.
Right.
So it's honestly it was like Christmas came early.
Well, you're 5-2 after 7 rounds.
Yeah.
Obviously 4-0 in Pioneer, so hoping to get back to that tomorrow. Players Championship race is tight, but you're doing pretty well this weekend. Hoping this deck can carry you there, and then hopefully maybe a top 8 too, so show it off.
I'm focused on this tournament right now. We'll see the PC stuff that'll fall where it does. I'm focused on getting to that top 8. A little bit of stumble here in Modern, but we've recovered. We won the last one. If we can get this one, round 8, go in at 6-2, get to play this deck again, I've been super happy with it. Honestly, there's not a matchup I can think of that I'm actively scared to play.
All right.
So, I don't think any of your matchups are awesome, like slam dunks, but all your matchups are solid. Your deck's really consistent. So I'll be excited to get 4 more rounds of Pioneer, and hopefully 7.
All right. That's Mono Black Aggro. That's Ross Merriam. I'm Nick Miller. Stay tuned to Star City Games all weekend long for the action here in Roanoke.